Well, the old expression goes, coulda, woulda, shoulda. Should have done the tune-up on the 2001 Chevy Malibu in the fall when we still had some nice weather. Well, the car gave signs a couple of weeks ago when we had a little bit of a warm spell and rain. Sort of coughed and hiccuped when I was starting it to go to work. And from then on it seemed fine. It was perfect. Even when the temperature dropped to minus 18, which is roughly 0 Fahrenheit for our American friends. And it performed perfectly. But as soon as it got damp and mild again, it did the same thing all over. So, seeing how the spark plugs and wires on the car, I think were replaced when we had the stock market crash in 2008. There's been a lot of kilometers put on the car since then. I figure it's time to get some new parts for the car. So today's clip is going to be about changing spark plugs on a 2001 Chevy Malibu. Things you'll need, and this will go for most any car you're working on. A good monkey suit or mechanic's overalls, something to keep you warm on a cold Canadian day if you're up here. A fender cover to keep from scratching fenders and things. Paper towels for those inevitable little messes, and of course on a well-oiled car you're going to get grease all over yourself or your hands or whatever. A decent set of spark plug wires. These I got from CarQuest. We'll see how well they do in the long run. They seem to have high temperature boots on them. And of course the new spark plugs. Some silicone dielectric grease that keeps the boots from seizing on both the spark plug ends and on the ignition coil ends as well too. Because this is a distributorless ignition equipped car. And of course the proper tools you need: a proper spark plug socket, and a nice flexible ratchet helps on these cars, and a couple of extensions, a feeler gauge, and a paper clip. And I'll show you afterwards what we're going to be using that paper clip for. Of course, always look up your specifications and to see what your gap is supposed to be for your plugs. In this case, it's supposed to be 0.060, so I'll check the gap in a few minutes, and we'll be outside and we'll be starting on the car. Well, at least you won't be freezing. I will. Although plugs generally do come pre-gapped from the factory, it's always a good idea to double check them and make sure. So we just got our combination of gauge thicknesses to make up our 0.060, and what we got, yep, this one's on. Check our next one. All ready to get started. Now, the back of these engines, which we'll do first, is I'm from the side of the camp that says always get the worst part of a job done first. That way the rest of it hopefully will just coast through, but we usually know what happens with that, but we'll try our luck at it and just see where it goes. Now my hands fortunately are small enough to get down in here to reach the wires and the plugs and things, and some people with bigger hands might have a little bit of trouble, and some models too of these is just plain impossible to get to the back, but I know it's going to be a picnic to try to get these wires detached. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to get the plugs changed first, and then we'll do our wire routing. So we have to run the wires up and underneath this side over here actually, and through for our front side, which won't be too bad actually, but it's just to get everything unhooked over here. So we'll get started and we'll see where that goes. Well, after a bit of twisting and tugging, I finally got this one off of the spark plug closest to the passenger side on the firewall. Okay, finally found the first one by feel over here. And when you're loosening them up, it should just take a pretty light tap to break them free. And they should come out nice and smooth. They shouldn't feel gritty or anything like that, because remember, we're dealing with aluminum cylinder heads, so we have to be careful whenever we're doing stuff like that. So we don't want to strip. What I want to do is strip aluminum cylinder heads. The car's certainly peppy. It gets as you could expect in cold weather like this. Let's see what's going on. It should be out enough. Oh yeah, I think my plugs are very worn out. I don't know how this car was actually running. Check that out. Yeah, I think it's time for new spark plugs, don't you? Huh. Like I said, I can't believe this car was running as well as it's been running. So much for the non-believers of these little 3.1s. Huh, I love this little car. Well, sometimes we really take things for granted with the way today's cars run, with all the electronics that can compensate. Older cars would never run like this with plugs this badly worn. Yeah, sometimes we all make mistakes. And I'm so careful at making sure the car is rust proof, full of grease and oil and everything else like that. And the fact that it always starts, and I didn't do anything until, well, it started to give me some signs, is pretty much what a lot of people do in this day and age when money's tight. But sometimes it can be false economy, but I'm really glad I caught this one before it did any damage. As it is, my ignition coils may be a little bit damaged at this point, and the reason being is because they have to produce a much higher kilovolt to be able to fire across such a big gap like this. This is a distributorless ignition coil car. These can produce over 50,000 volts. That can take a toll on the windings after a while. I do have some spare coils in the trunk of the car, new ones, so I'm not too worried if one gives out. I can change it right away, but leaving things to go like this can cause detriment later on. We'll see what will happen. Alright, getting the new spark plug was pretty much just by feel alone. Now to tighten it up, we'll use both hands so we don't put any sideways force on this, possibly break the porcelain. You tighten them up. Tapered seat spark plugs, barely a 1/16 of a turn past what you would call hand tight. That's all you really need. Something like that. No matter what you're working on, new, old, you're always going to find a little bit of snafus and pitfalls and things. You can see the way the wires run down in between. It looks like a coolant line. And yeah, that's a coolant line for the heater hose down there. And the cylinder head. Now an easy way to do this would just be to take the wires, throw them up and over and sling them over this. That's really not the right way to do it. You want to try to route wires in their proper factory ways. The factory spent a lot of time and obviously money to figure out the best way to do that. Well, we hope so in either case. And it's been quite the treat just getting off this simple loom that goes through in between the cylinder head and the coolant pipe down there. This piece of looming is very, very dry. It's busted up into a bunch of pieces here. Yeah, sure, fall down so you'll get caught. I'll get that in a sec with a needle nose. But I'll go and I'll get another piece of looming to put into there so it can be routed properly. See how pretty dry these were inside. So yeah, definitely a good cause of the damp weather starting problem that I was starting to notice. We'll get that taken care of. Patience, patience, patience doing these things. Okay, we have the back side of the job done. Obviously it takes longer than most garages will probably do this job in, but still saving yourself a little bit of money. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give the car a quick start just to make sure it's running fine. That way if you do have a problem you can at least isolate it to one side or the other. But I did one part at a time, and I basically know the firing order of these things off by heart, so anyway, let's see what happens. Is it going to go chitty chitty bang bang, or is it going to start nice? Here we go. Okay, success. Knocked loose the, I was fidgeting with the wires over trying to get the ignition wires up and out. I inadvertently disconnected the crank sensor wire over here. Whenever you're doing work on cars, it's always good to keep an eye out for other things. Now, I did notice something when I was playing around with the wiring harnesses. These are pretty flexible, as you can see. This over here seems to be a little bit hard. Now, I'm not sure if it's because it's over a particularly hot area of the engine. It's near the EGR valve, but this over the EGR valve isn't really too hard, so I'm not too sure what the story is on this, but just to be safe, I have a piece of this loom. It's actually a heat-resistant loom. It's an insulator, and it really helps to cut down on heat damage done to wires. I have a lot of this on the Vista Cruiser, actually, around starter wires and battery cables that go down to the header. So just as a bit of preventive maintenance, I'm just going to slip a piece, slit it down, put over here and tie it on with a couple of, or a few zip straps. Like I said, not too sure, but better to be safe than sorry. Okay, we finally got the back done. Starting to get cold here now, the sun's starting to go down, but once the sun goes away and the shade gets pretty cool. So, but anyway, we're ready to start the front. Got all the dirt blown out from inside the spark plug wells. There was very little, it looks like. Got the cables loose, and now we're going to take off the plugs in the front. By the way, it's about 2,000 K on the oil. Still pretty clean on this car. It stays very clean. It always has. Changing every 5,000 kilometers without fail. Be back when we get them all changed. And no, I have not forgotten about the paper clip. I'll show you what that's all about. Like I said, I didn't forget it. When you put silicone or dielectric grease into the spark plug terminals, and of course the tower coil type terminals, when you push these on, you're making a pretty much airtight seal. So of course what's going to happen, you're going to end up having some compressed air in this over here, especially when it heats up. Has a chance of popping the boots off. You don't see this too much in the spark plug ends because you have a much deeper and a much more of a rubber boot going onto the spark plug than you do on the towers up over there. So the idea is you slip a paper clip down onto this, and then while you're putting it on, the camera might be able to get this over here. I don't know how much it's going to show, but the idea of it is to put the wire on like that. As you're slipping it down, it helps to burp out air, and you slide it out as you're putting it on. That helps to burp and expel the air. A little bit tricky, but it just eliminates the possibility of having you get a problem with a boot possibly popping off of one of these things. Yeah, there we go. Pretty much done. There. I'm sure it's not going to pop off on you. But of course, I put it on over the wire so I can pull it off of the spark plug over here. It's underneath here again. Away we go. I keep check and double checking everything. She avoids having a lot of headaches afterwards. Alright, now we'll get this thing all loomed up. And we'll start her up again. And no wires are disconnected. I double checked this time. I meant to show a start of the car after we finished the tune-up job yesterday. But unfortunately, I didn't push the button all the way for the record. And then when I pushed the record to stop, it started recording. And it ended up recording for almost a half an hour in my pocket. Oh well. Nothing but voices muttering and things, and just total black. So it was actually a good thing because it rained last night quite a bit. It's pretty damp outside, and we'll see how well the car will start now. So just gonna do a cold start. Perfect. Much better now. That's a bit of that infamous 3.1 piss and rattle when cold, but it goes away right away when it's running for a couple minutes, even in the coldest of weather. But I never wanted to have anybody dive into the motor, the dealer, or anybody for that fact, because it runs so well, you're always afraid what you might get back. Now I'll give an interesting story when we go back inside about what happened to the spark plugs. Why 3 of them were pretty worn, and 3 of them were in, well, kind of sort of okay condition. not that horrible looking, but main thing is the car is running better now. It's showing 340,264 kilometers. Marching on. Well, just a quick epilogue as to what happened yesterday when I saw the spark plugs and the condition they were in. I did a little bit of reading up on the subject, and looks like the last time the plugs were replaced, I used a Platinum G-Power NGK spark plug. Don't get me wrong, NGK is a very, very good make of plug. I've used them in other vehicles. They're used in so many vehicles as OE equipment, and I've never really had a problem with them, and it's just testament just how well the car was actually running. Never missed or anything like that. We passed an emissions test a little while ago, and I haven't done too many kilometers on it since then, so fuel mileage has been pretty respectable, although I'm sure it will pick up a little bit with new spark plugs. But these are the ones that I used in the car last time as well too, by looking at the numbers on the old ones. From what I understand, the way these distributorless ignition coil systems work, yes, when I got the car many years ago, I was hearing all sorts of horror stories about ignition modules failing and coils failing on, so I picked up a spare one. I've had it ever since then, and so at least I can use it for the mock setup over here. From the way I understand, the way the circuitry works is when these things fire, electricity basically goes around one way or the other in a loop like that when they fire. I may be right, I may be wrong. Totally amateur speculation. It's been years since I've worked on these things, and I have the books if I have to dive into something one of these days. And looks like only one side of these plugs may have the platinum tip. I believe it might be the center electrode. So I guess when it's firing in the direction that it normally would, all is okay. But if it's firing the other way, you get a lot of transfer of metal particles from one of these electrodes to the other. It's strictly speculations because three were in fair condition like the one on the left, and three were pretty much worn down like the one you see on the right over there. I have the cylinders marked out. I can trace which one goes to where and see, but that's just my speculation as to what has happened over here. So this might be something to keep in mind. And I don't know, but I just get what they call a double platinum plug, or these iridium types. But I just went on the vehicle manufacturer's recommendations. I believe it's about 90,000, 100,000 miles that are on these set, because I changed the spark plugs almost immediately after I got the car, and it had very, very low miles on it. And this is only the third time plugs are going into this car in the 340,000 kilometers it has. So it'll be interesting to see what will happen. I'll keep an eye on it. And I was reading on the anti-seize versus no anti-seize debate and things like that. Now, I had absolutely no trouble getting these plugs out, because I remember reading years ago that indeed these NGK plugs do have some sort of a coating on them that literally sacrifices itself into the metals to keep things from seizing up. But next time I might very well use an anti-seize. But again, 2 times I've taken the plugs out, I've had absolutely no problem with them. But I would recommend next time to use some of this anti-seize stuff on plugs regardless, because you just want to try to avoid any sort of problems that you end up having with them in the first place. Anyway, we'll see what will happen with the adventures of this car to come in the days, months, years. Have a great day. Old car season driving will be upon us soon, and we'll soon have our old cars out again.